Director of Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, Professor Shirish Kedar, Professor Sachin Patwardhan, the Dean, senior faculty members, heads of departments, distinguished guests, friends for the media, and dear students. A very good evening to all of you. It's a matter of great honor and pride for me to address the TechFest 2025 at IIT Bombay. I have been told that this TechFest is the largest such event in Asia. It's a platform where innovation meets leadership, and I'm glad to be part of this particular event. I'm also cognizant of the fact that I'm speaking today to one of the brightest and the youngest minds of our country. You people have the capability to take India forward, to realize its dreams of being Viksit Bharat by 2025. You have the potential, and I'm sure you'll be able to do that. Let me start with a short couplet of Sahir Ludhianvi, which says, उस मुल्क की सरहद को कोई छू नहीं सकता जिस मुल्क की सरहद की निगहबान हैं आंखें हर तरफ के जज्बात का ऐलान है आंखें शबनम कभी शोला कभी तूफान है आंखें. This couplet is dedicated to the citizens of India who are the eyes of the nation. It is said that informed citizenry of a country is the first line of defense of any country. An informed, involved, and passionate population contributes to the defense of the nation. They are the Shola, Shabnam, and Tufan, the dew, the flame, and the storm of nationalism. Today's event is actually a realization of the fact that the citizens of the country, including the academia, are involved in the security challenges that India faces. And that's why they've invited the Chief of Defense Staff for this particular talk and asked him to speak on a subject which is so relevant: India's strategic defense vision, technology, integration, and future warfare. I think it's a very relevant theme to speak about, a theme that intrinsically connects technology to the institution of armed forces. And while I share my thoughts on this particular subject, it actually feels to me that I'm speaking to a war college, and Army, Navy, or Air Force War College, and the theme is almost similar. What I will do is, while speaking on this subject, I'll talk about nature and character of war, how it is changing, what kind of wars can we expect in future. Then I'll be establishing a relationship between technology and strategy. And then, of course, we will talk about integration and innovation, a subject which is dear to me and also dear to you people. Let me start by saying that war is a phenomenon as old as human civilization. The need for dominance and use of violence to achieve what we desire, this is all part of basic human nature. So war has been there ever since human civilization has been there. So war is organized violence for political ends. Clausewitz, a famous thinker actually on war, he had said that war is a continuation of politics by other means. He also said that it's imposition of one's will on the enemy. And war over a period of time has evolved as the society has evolved. When man was a hunter-gatherer, war meant fighting in small groups, inter-clan or inter-tribal clashes. As the society moved to the agriculture age, war involved armed bands under feudal chiefs and later into organized armies of kings and monarchs. With the industrial age came the modern armed forces of a nation state, structured, professional, and industrially enabled. They were organized to protect what constitutes a nation state. Three elements constitute a nation state, modern nation state, that is territory, its people, and its ideology. However, currently we are transiting into an era where basic elements that constitute a state, or what we talk about sovereignty of state, that is getting challenged by a number of changes, by free movement of people, money, digital currencies, ideas and ideologies across borders. This challenges the very concept and understanding of sovereignty. The situation has been further aggravated by transnational ideologies like jihad or multinational conglomerates whose sometimes market capital exceeds that of some nations. Today, we have organized armed forces of a state. Apart from that, we have mercenaries which fight. We have private security agencies we fight. We have transnational citizens, netizens fighting and operating in the digital domain. We have social influencers shaping perceptions in the cognitive domain. Individuals are exploiting knowledge on internet to make explosives, chemical weapons, maybe tomorrow biological weapons. So the arena of warfare actually has expanded many folds. And the type of combatants we find today are not restricted to the organized armed forces which we thought were there with the nation states. Another area which has seen a major change is the battlefield. This is an important constituent any kind of a conflict, and it's where the outcome of the war is finally decided. Historically, if you look at history, ancient and medieval wars, all battlefields were single battlefield, generally on land. Today, battlefields have expanded from land to the maritime domain and then to the air. I think my belief is simple. Whenever man or mankind gets used to a particular way of things, a way of earning livelihood, then it becomes lucrative for an adversary to deny this to you by use of force. And that's what is war about. So we've seen this in case of the maritime domain, where sea routes were opened up for trade and commerce, and then they were used to deny. Maritime trade grew, conflict naturally extended into the maritime domain. Control of seas also ensured that it became a powerful tool to influence events on land. Similar kind of thing we find being replicated in the air domain. War expanded into the air domain to deny its use to the adversary and to exploit its influence and to exploit and influence events on land as well as sea. For thousands of years, actually, all battlefields were on land. For the past 400 or 500 years, it's been in the maritime domain also. And you can say in the past 100 years or so, they have been in the air domain. So air is relatively a new domain. Now, actually, we are at a cusp of an era that warfare is going to expand into newer and unknown domains. Cyber, space, electromagnetic spectrum, cognitive domain. These are new domains of warfare. These are no longer niche military spaces. We depend on them every day, which makes them critical and therefore contested for any kind of future warfare. Let me now talk about these old domains and new domains of warfare. When I said old domains, it was land, maritime, and the air domain. And these new domains were space, cyber, we had electromagnetic domain, and the cognitive domain. History is replete with examples that warfare in the old domains is always brutal, it's long-lasting, and it's kind of a slugfest. It consumes the manpower, material, time, and national resources. You know why it is? This is largely because the principal platforms employed in land warfare have been there for quite some time. Tank was there on a battlefield almost about 100 years ago, and still been there. We have cannons and artillery guns, muskets, rifles, etc. They've been in there on the battlefield for more than 500, 600 years. So both sides of the battlefield, the adversaries or the belligerents to this particular conflict, have evolved their tactics, technology, practices, strategies to counter those things. So there is nothing new actually to produce on the battlefield, and hence this battle on these old domains, as we see, is largely a kind of a slugfest. It takes long amount of time. It's very, very brutal. And the two examples of this we find in modern warfare are, one is the Ukrainian war, which is dragging on for more than 4 years. It's like fighting in the traditional domain, but of course with new technology. And similarly, we find this in Gaza, the war which lasted for more about 3 years. So one can say that Old domains are prolonged and punishing as it's predictable. To gain advantage, we need to shift focus, and we can do this by innovation, integration, and involving new domains of warfare. Now let me talk about new domains. As I said, warfare in the new domains is faster and smarter. It's also shorter in duration, and the tempo of that warfare is very, very high. Decisions are compressed in time, and effects of that war are felt almost instantaneously. This was clearly visible in Operation Sindoor, a war which lasted only about 4 days, giving India a decisive victory. But all domains of warfare were used simultaneously with great amount of tempo. This dynamism in warfare was also evident in the Israel-Iran conflict, where actions in new domain, particularly cyber-enabled ISR, information surveillance and reconnaissance, information operations, and long-range precision effects shape the strategic outcomes. Again, these new domains are the ones where actually you can create asymmetries between nations. And those asymmetries actually help you win a war. It's difficult to create asymmetry in, say, land warfare because every kind of platform has lived for hundreds of years. But in new domains like cyberspace, you can create asymmetries. And if you can create asymmetries, you can exploit them, and then you can actually defeat your adversary. So this is what happens when developed nations do, try and create asymmetries in these new domains. So as Indian Armed Forces, we must attempt to maintain technological asymmetry in new domains to remain combat ready. If I were to now summarize as to what kind of warfare, character-wise, will it be, I can say that these will be conducted simultaneously across multiple domains to achieve faster decision-making and quick victory. So multi-domain operations will no longer be an option, but a necessity, where effects of one domain will be immediately felt onto the other domain. Multi-domain operations will also require multi-domain capabilities and cross-domain control, command and control. This will require extensive coordination and control between not only Army, Navy, and Air Force, but also cyber forces, space forces, and forces which are operating in the cognitive domain. So warfare for centuries, again, has been actually a contact warfare between two belligerents. And today we are entering into an era that will be a mix between contact and non-contact kind of warfare, the one which we saw in Operation Sindoor. It will also be a mix of kinetic warfare along with non-kinetic warfare, with non-kinetic warfare operating in the cyber and the cognitive domain. Well, these were influences on how warfare is evolving as far as domains, belligerents, your combatants are concerned. Let me now talk about geopolitical trends, which also have an influence on the type of war which will happen. I started my talk by saying that war is a continuation of politics by other means. Politics and war are both closely connected. A nation's political interests are always paramount. Military actions are subordinate to political decisions. That's a well-known fact, especially in democratic countries like India. If we look at the conflicts which happened in this globe across us, we find there are two paradoxical kind of trends. First, there is an increased propensity to use military force for settlement of disputes. This is seen in Ukraine, Armenia, Syria, Iran, Gaza, Sudan, Central Africa, Thailand, Cambodia, etc. While nations want to achieve political ends through use of force, they are also conscious of the destructive potential of modern wars, because not only of conventional weapons, but also because of advent of nuclear weapons. This has made war an obsolete phenomenon. When I say war, I mean declared wars an obsolete phenomenon. War is constantly taking place. So these are those two paradoxical kind of trends. So force is being used for enforcing political decision, but with calibration. This gives rise to something which can be called as informal wars or undeclared wars. Russia categorized it as special operations. The reluctance of nation states to enter into full-scale war or declared wars, which were the trend actually till World War II or say 1917 war has given rise to these undeclared wars, and it has also created some kind of an static stability because of weapons of mass destruction or the potential of conventional weapons itself becoming humongous. This has given rise to two kind of trends, to kind of extract importance of out of this static stability which I just spoke about. One is terrorism. The form of warfare exploits the deterrent stability achieved through strategic and conventional weapons to bleed the enemy, like through 1,000 cuts, and India has been a victim to this. And in this, deniability of this and rhetoric are part of this strategy. And as I said, India has been witness to this for past many, many years. And this kind of warfare, I think, can only be deterred by actions like Operation Sindoor. Second is a form of grey zone warfare, in which historical differences can be executed by small operations, which will give you long-term kind of an effects. The question is, what kind of threats and challenges India should be prepared for? I think this should be based on two major facts. One is that both our adversaries are, one is a nuclear weapon state and other is a nuclear armed states. So hence, we should not allow that level of deterrence to be breached. And second, we have territorial disputes with both of them. Hence, in my view, we should be prepared to fight short duration, high intensity conflicts to deter terrorism, something like Operation Sindoor, that's one. Second, we should be prepared for a land-centric, long-duration conflict because we have land disputes, yet try and avoid it. Third, we must exploit new domains and create asymmetry with our weaker adversary and yet not allow these asymmetries to be exploited by other nations. Terrorism and grey zone warfare maybe will remain a threat and will require both defensive and offensive response. So having explained the kind of belligerents we'll have, the kind of battlefields you have, and what kind of geopolitical situations will lead to types of war in future as far as our nation is concerned, let me try and connect technology with warfare. To win a war, actually, you require something which is called as a strategy. It's traditionally, the understanding of strategy was known as an art of the general. In ancient India, we spoke about this as Raniti. Ran means warfare, and Niti means policy. Strategy was used by generals to win a war, and there was a famous saying in Sanskrit which said, Yuktaya sarve sambhavati. That means, by strategy, everything becomes possible. So winning a war is not an kind of an option, but the only recourse available to nation states. Because fate of the nation depends on the outcome of war. There are no runners-up in war, we all know that, and there are no consolation prizes for brave attempts. The harsh reality has driven military commanders throughout ages to strategize to gain advantage over the adversary. Today, of course, we use strategy in the broadest term. We talked about business strategy, we got financial strategy. But essentially, strategy means trying to align the ends, ways with the means. For centuries, again, if we say strategy has been dependent on one thing, well, that was geography or terrain. And when I talk about geography, it was about physical as well as human geography. Careful exploitation of terrain has decided the outcome of smallest of battle to the biggest of campaign, and that's true for battles like, means you count any battle, terrain would have played an important factor into it. Whether it was Palasi, it was Panipat in Indian context, Waterloo, we have modern wars like Vietnam, terrain was an important factor. Modern warfare today is influenced more by technology and less by geography. In fact, the problems of geography have been overcome by technology. This is ushering in a revolution in military affairs. And I classically, for a simple understanding, I have classified this revolution in military affairs as three revolutions. First revolution in military affair, I have classified as maneuver warfare, which is because it was brought in by advances in mobility, ground mobility like tanks, ICVs, ships, guns. and of course, air mobility, sometimes helicopters and aircrafts. So this ushered in something known as maneuver, and maneuver used to take place on ground or in kind of an air, and it introduced concepts like blitzkrieg, which was the German concept. It's introduced concepts like air-land battle by the Americans or deep battles of erstwhile Soviet era, and but maneuver warfare largely dependent on terrain, apart from these technology platforms which I just spoke about. This got changed after Kosovo and the Iraq War. Warfare moved from maneuver warfare to net-centric warfare. That was because of advances in sensor technologies, ISR, communication, computing technologies. And this introduced concepts like battlefield transparency and enhanced situational awareness. And now you could carry out long-distance precision strikes and non-linearity. Battles were fought with front lines. Now there were no front lines. You could go deep inside because you had long-range precision strike weapons, etc. These coming in. So non-linearity became the buzzword. And there were multiple domains which were opened up into warfare, which I spoke about earlier part of the lecture. So warfare became multi-domain. Today, we are at a cusp of a third revolution in military affair, and I have been calling it convergence warfare. This is happening because a number of technologies are simultaneously affecting the nature and character of warfare both. Earlier, there were few technologies were influencing how wars were fought, but today there are a number of technologies. It could be artificial intelligence, machine learning, edge computing, quantum, hypersonics, advanced materials, robotics. So a number of them are influencing warfare together. And this is going to change the speed of warfare, the speed at which we conduct warfare. So I mentioned a number of technologies. So each technology affects warfare in a different manner. It will be difficult to classify what is the effect of each technology in warfare. What I will do is I've shortlisted 5 trends, which I'll tell you how the warfare is, convergence warfare is getting affected by these technologies. First trend is about celerity. Celerity is about speed or velocity. This is happening because of advances in, say, hypersonics, long-range precision strikes, fractional orbital systems, stealth technologies. These are at one end, and at the other end we have drones which have very small radar cross-section, which are at very well flying at low speeds, low altitude. They're difficult to kind of detect, and hence engagement of targets along this spectrum and at the ranges which they are, this becomes very, very difficult. And this particular trend is introducing a concept known as non-linearity, absolute non-linearity. That means today everything across every range is targetable. Now, that's a fundamental change that's happening in warfare. So battlefields are expanding both in spatial as well as temporal planes. The second advantage or trend which we can say is because of sensor technologies. We all are aware that nature has given us 5 senses, and we are about, say, 8 billion people, so we may have 16 billion of eyes if you count them as sensors, actually. But today, man has made sensors which are much beyond these 5 natural senses. You have optical, electro-optical, radars, synthetic aperture radars, electronic, radio, seismic sensors, underwater sensors, chemical, biological, radiological sensors. All actually are producing different kind of transparency into battlefield. We have just been told about magnetic sensors. You can detect something which IIT professors were telling about, that we can detect anything which is magnetic, which is underground or underwater. So it's huge. It's difficult actually today because of this sensor. And next is the ubiquitousness of these sensors. I just said that there could be 16 billion eyes on this planet, but the number of optical sensors which we have far exceeds that. Everyone possesses one mobile camera smartphone which has a camera, and there will be multiple over here. The moment you go outside, they're outside on the roads, they're outside in the air, they're in space, they all watch. And this is creating huge amount of data, and this is creating absolute transparency. So there's nothing which can be hidden. So in war, surprise, which was a major factor, that goes away. Because unless you move subterranean or unless you move underwater, everything would be detectable, everything would be known. So this is again producing transparency of very high levels. The third trend which we find is towards robotics and automation. This is because of advances in robotics, unmanned autonomous weapon systems, and this is introducing concepts like manned-unmanned teaming, or say exoskeletal with humans for combat. And this, for ages, war was always between two combatants, belligerents, which are human beings. Or the one human being could be better armed with a better sword, or better protected with a better helmet, or could be on a better horse or a charger. But essentially it was between humans. But now we are at a cusp in history where warfare could transit between man to machine. Your first contact could be with a machine, an armed drone, autonomous drone. So tomorrow, this may well be warfare would be between machines and machines. And this is going to introduce automated, intelligent, and autonomous kill chains in combat and warfighting. The third trend is because of advances in material and manufacturing technology. This is producing lighter, stronger, smarter, more resilient systems which are far cheaper. 3D printing, rapid enabling, rapid prototyping, reducing dependency on global supply chains, etc. are the new norm. This is reducing cost and causing proliferation of weapon systems. Last trend is about battlefield becoming intelligent. That's because of data, data analytics, and machine learning and artificial intelligence. So again, this is helping us to take faster and better decisions, and the decision cycle is getting shorter, and the battlefield or warfare is becoming intelligent. It's not a decision being taken by a service chief or a senior leadership, but he's being assisted constantly by artificial intelligence to take a better and a faster decision. So the tempo of future warfare will be very, very high, and it will also be intelligent. So with these technologies, what we are seeing is the emergence of third revolution in military affairs, which is convergence. It is, in my opinion, convergence warfare because it converges kinetic with non-kinetic, contact warfare with non-contact warfare, tactics, operational art, and strategy. It converges first revolution military affairs with second and with third. It converges traditional domains with the new domains of warfare. Hence, we are entering into an era where reasons for war and methods are changing. The battlefields are expanding. New type of combatants are being introduced in the battlefield, and technology is introducing new concepts and strategies in warfare. And mind you, all this is happening at a breakneck speed. What are we doing to cope up with these kind of changes, the Indian Armed Forces? These changes, to incorporate these changes into the Indian Armed Forces, we will require major reforms, and these reforms will span structural, organizational, conceptual, doctrinal, procedural, and even cultural kind of changes. So we've been doing things in one manner for the past 78 years, but now if we have to be prepared, we have to move around with breakneck kind of a speed, the kind of speed which I just said technology and warfare is changing. This is why in 2025 we had declared that as a year of reforms, and probably it's an era now we'll have to declare the next decade actually as a decade of further reforms. If I were to summarize, because the subject of this talk is not to tell you about the kind of reforms we are taking, if I were to summarize this, I can summarize it with the acronym of JAY, which is of Jai Hind. That's victory to Hind, that's India. And this was given none other than the Honorable Prime Minister. J is for jointness. A is for Atmanirbharta. And I is for innovation. So when we talk about jointness, it's about tri-service jointness. That ability to work together, plan together, and then fight together. The ultimate culminating stage of this kind of a reform will lead to introduction of integrated theater commands, which was mentioned by the director of the IIT. Second is about Atmanirbharta. Atmanirbharta is about self-reliance. And self-reliance is something to know about your own self. Self-reliance, the first word is the self, and so is Atman in Atmanirbharta.